preparation for these kind of press conferences as well.
We're watching
Special Counsel Jack Smith approach the podium. Let's listen as he speaks on this date of the second federal indictment of Donald Trump.
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They are patriots and they are the very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would like to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working on this investigation with my office, as well as the many career prosecutors and law enforcement agents from around the country who have worked on previous January 6th investigations. These women and men are public servants of the very highest order, and it is a privilege to work alongside them. Thank you.
Why didn't you charge any of the other co-conspirators?
Brief remarks there from Special Counsel Jack Smith on the first ever indictment of a former president for trying to steal an election. Donald Trump now indicted in the January 6th probe along with 6 co-conspirators. This is MSNBC's breaking coverage for you. We are going to get reaction from our legal experts. I want to bring in for the first time in this hour former acting U.S. Solicitor General, DOJ veteran, Neil Katyal. Neil, it is official now in a way that it wasn't an hour ago or even the day of the target letter. And so with that in mind, I'd like your response, one, to what we just heard from Special Counsel Smith, and two, quite seriously, what tonight means for legal history and democracy in America.
Ari, the gravity of this moment cannot be overstated. I mean, it is just unbelievable what we just saw with Jack Smith. You saw a career prosecutor, someone charged with enforcing the law, say the former president of the United States and the current leading presidential candidate for one of the parties is charged for his role in trying to upend a free and fair election. This is certainly the biggest legal case in our lifetimes. It is one of the biggest cases ever in the history of the United States. It is up there with Dred Scott. It is up there with Brown versus Board of Education because it goes to who we are as a people. And Jack Smith today did something to restore confidence in the rule of law in unimaginable ways. And you heard him speak in such a measured way, emphasizing Donald Trump's presumption of innocence, that this evidence all has to be tested in a court of law. I expect Donald Trump to continue speaking in exactly the opposite way, demonizing Jack Smith, calling him deranged, calling it the Biden prosecution, but I think all of our viewers should understand Jack Smith was not appointed by President Biden. He was picked as an independent career prosecutor, and he's operating under special counsel guidelines that give him full independence to conduct this investigation in the way he wants to, in charge who he thinks is warranted. So when you hear the attack on the Biden Justice Department going after Donald Trump, that is poppycock. This is an independent career prosecutor bringing some of the most grave charges imaginable because of what happened on January 6th. So I think Jack Smith has met the moment, and now it is up to this criminal trial to proceed with a very, very good judge, with Judge Chutkin, fair to both sides. And if Donald Trump is so convinced he's innocent, bring it on, put on your defense in a court of law, and let's see how it fares.
Neil Kochel, stay with me, part of our breaking coverage here, as well as our team in the newsroom. Same question to you, Andrew Weissman, because sometimes covering these stories can be like the Weather Channel when the storm is days away. By the time the storm gets here, everyone's moving on to the next thing. I want to make sure we absorb here with our experts and our DOJ veterans what this means now that it's official and what you thought of what we just heard from Special Counsel Smith.
So it's great that you started there, because I do think that what happens a lot of times is we get anesthetized to what's happened, and especially with Donald Trump, because there's so many things that he does where you forget to step back and think about the enormity of the situation we're in. We are about to see it's a historic ordeal that this country is going to go through because of choices that Donald Trump made. I think that as a prosecutor, I think that Jack Smith correctly, and you can see it in the indictment, really focused on the line. That you have a former president who, in order to stay in power, lied in just numerous ways to try and stay in power. I know you wanted to focus on some specifics, and I do think that the specifics sort of goes to your larger point. And one of the things I was struck by in terms of the pressure, not just to a Department of Justice that we worked in, and it's very hard to read this and see what was being done to the Justice Department and what clearly Jeff Clark was willing to do in order to fabricate a fraud investigation to keep the former president in office. But the pressure on Mike Pence, it's very clear that Mike Pence gave clear testimony in the grand jury. It looks very clear that Mark Meadows did.
Yeah, let me slow you down and let you continue, but just slow down the key points.
Sure.
That some of the damning material from what we now have, that we didn't have this morning, is that the vice president at the time, now former Vice President Pence, has cooperated at least to the degree that he handed over the contemporaneous notes, which show what he said at the time. Lawyers find that very probative. And he provided actual testimony. And then we're going to do it together. I'm curious because I think viewers will be able to tell this is breaking, so we can't coordinate. I'm on page 37. What page are you on?
I'm on page 36.
36? So you go first.
Okay, great. It's perfect. So on page 36 in paragraph 97, this is part of the effort of the former president, Donald Trump, with his vice president telling him that he has the authority to do something that the vice president is repeatedly saying he doesn't. This is on January 5th, the defendant met alone with the vice president. When the vice president refused to agree to the defendant's request that he obstruct the certification, the defendant grew frustrated and told the vice president that the defendant would have to publicly criticize him. Upon learning of this, the vice president's chief of staff, that's Mark Meadows, was concerned for the vice president's safety and alerted the head of the vice president's Secret Service detail. Just step back. This goes to really the specific and then the general point. The allegation here is that the president of the United States was going to take a step with respect to his own vice president that caused such concern that the chief of staff, his own chief of staff, was alerting the Secret Service to violence that would come to the Vice President of the United States because of the conduct of the President of the United States.
And that was, to your point, proven to be not only not alarmist, but prescient, given the gallows that were erected, the Secret Service clash, hang Mike Pence, agents, according to the January 6th committee, getting this evidence that nobody initially knew, even on the 7th, given how bad it looked, that agents were calling, saying goodbye to family members. And so you view Smith as telling a jury what with this? We're on page 36, paragraph 97.
This is just one of the many lies that, as David pointed out, this is sort of a masterpiece in terms of a narrative, and yet it's also, and it's a tragedy in terms of what it tells about this country. But this is talking about allegations, just to be clear, it still has to be proved, but allegations against the former president of repeated lies, even where it could lead to violence against his own vice president, such that, I mean, it's just remarkable to me that if you have Mark Meadows, who to me this reads also, that Mark Meadows, there's a reason I think he is not one of the co-conspirators when you look at this. I mean, to me, it suggests that he has definitely cooperated, because when you read just that paragraph, to me it reads like that's where they got some of this information.
Well, and you've gotten people to cooperate in the past, so that's interesting coming from you as legal analysis. It also speaks to the strength of this indictment and how detailed it is, that Smith doesn't just have all the public's terrible stuff people know, but all this inside information. I have a follow-up for you as we turn to page 37, and Neil Koch, I want to bring you in on the same question, because this is something we discussed when we covered the Jan 6 hearings and other things, and people ask, is it going to lead to anything? Well, tonight, it led to this indictment of Donald Trump for a coup-related set of conspiracies. On page 37, again, we're reading this on MSNBC for the first time because we've just been making our way through it. The language is very interesting. We're talking about a conspiracy that Jack Smith says was hatched inside the White House at the highest levels of our government. And it says, quote, an agent of the defendant. It's always a bad sign when the outgoing president is described this way in an indictment, but quote, an agent of the defendant contacted a senator to ask him to deliver documents to the vice president. The agent then facilitated receipt of the, quote, fraudulent certificates signed by the defendant's fraudulent electors in Michigan and Wisconsin. And this was, as you know, Andrew, the effort and the plot and the now indicted plot went this far, deep into the day of the 6th, after what you just described as what they perceived as a safety issue, a threat to the vice president. Now they're trying to get the fraud in his hands, trying to push it forward. This is paragraph 101. What's striking to me, and I want your analysis, is it seems like Smith's prosecutors are saying here, what you did as an agent in this conspiracy in concert with them and other people went way beyond your lawful power.
Absolutely. And I think paragraph 99 to me has always been something that I think is, as looking at this as a prosecutor, is something that is, I think, going to be readily provable and is really hard for the former president to counteract. And that is where, after being told repeatedly by the vice president that he is not going to disobey his oath of office and overthrow the will of the people, on January 5th, the president of the United States issues a statement saying the vice president agrees with me that he does not have to go forward. And that is something that is alleged here to be absolutely 100% false.
Yeah.
And that is going to be a hard thing at trial for Donald Trump to ever counteract. And the real question for a jury is going to be, why would he do that? And if you want to get into somebody's state of mind, and did they intentionally do something, this is a clear lie. And just think about what it meant that it was on January 5th, just before the January 6th insurrection.
Andrew Weissman's walking us through this. I want to bring in David, but more news coming out of the Justice Department. We are now being told here in our newsroom that Attorney General Garland will be speaking momentarily. We heard from Jack Smith moments ago on the new Trump indictment, the first ever coup and election conspiracy indictment of a former president. Special Counsel Smith has a type of independence in his role, but he does work within the Attorney General's Justice Department. Now we're told any moment, certainly within the hour, according to the guidance we have, the Attorney General will come out and speak. So we will be bringing that to viewers as soon as we get eyes on the Attorney General. We'll go as early as we can, same way we did with the special counsel here on a night where we're dealing with the indictment of Donald Trump for efforts to steal the election. I have Neil Kochel on deck, but David wanted to get in. Go
I
ahead.
just was going to build on Andrew's point. You know, in paragraph 99, where the president comes out and says that he and the vice president are in total agreement, knowing that they're not, knowing that his position is wrong, it is not just another lie, but it also really speaks to his recklessness and the dangerousness of his lies.
And looking at that, I want to read to Neil for something else we want to get into. I told viewers we're going to be going through this piece by piece. It is a quite lengthy speaking indictment. Smith alleges that on January 6th, Trump made these false statements integral to criminal plans to defeat the federal government function, obstruct the certification, and interfere with others' right to vote and have their votes counted. That Trump repeated the false claims of election fraud, gave this, quote, false hope that the vice president might change the election outcome, as we've been discussing, and directed the crowd to go to the Capitol as a means to obstruct the certification and pressure the vice president to fraudulently obstruct the certification. Neil Kochel, building on what I mentioned I was going to ask you about, which is how the campaign and allegedly illegal campaign against Vice President Pence was carried out, is linked in this way to the crowd, not at the level of an insurrection, and yet at the same time, not as if it didn't matter at all. Smith is making the argument for the first time tonight, and he's got to prove it to a jury, that the violence was used, exploited by then outgoing President Trump.
Yeah, he's making that as part of the argument. So the big picture here, Ari, is that Jack Smith has to prove two things, as every federal prosecutor does to put someone in jail. You have to have a bad act, an actus reus, and a bad mens rea, a bad criminal intent. And so when Andrew Weissman talks about the January 5th Pence stuff, or when you talk about the fake electors and the plot in the 7 states to throw out the popular vote and just replace them with fake electors that state legislatures, dreamed up, that all goes to the bad act, the actus reus, because that's what conspiracy requires, an agreement to do something that is illegal. Trump's defense has always been more on the mens rea side. I legitimately thought I won the election, and so I didn't have a bad criminal intent. I was safeguarding American democracy. And that's where the other part of the detail in this indictment becomes so significant, both the part that you just flashed on the screen, as well as page after page of people going and saying to Donald Trump, you didn't win this thing. There's no way you won this thing. And the picture that's painted is you'd have to be literally insane to think you won the election after everyone, including the intelligence officials, the election security officials, and others are saying you didn't win. And so that's why you see both halves of this, both going to bad criminal intent and going to the bad criminal act.
Neil Kochel, thank you very much for making time for us on this breaking news night. We'll be hearing more from you tonight, and we're going to pick up the Attorney General, I'm told, speaking now.
Engaged in what has become the largest investigation in our history. In November last, I appointed Jack Smith, a special counsel, to take on the ongoing investigation in order to underline the department's commitment to accountability and independence. Mr. Smith and his team of experienced, principled career agents and prosecutors have followed the facts and the law wherever they lead. Any questions about this matter will have to be answered by the filings made in the courtroom.
Thank you, everyone.
We've been listening to Attorney General Garland. We're going to try to keep our cameras for as long as we can. This is him making what was basically unscheduled remarks there on the move in Untold Philadelphia. Again, this breaking news, so we're just following it, and you're seeing what we're seeing. Our camera's live, just trying to keep an eye on the Attorney General and his retinue. But he's speaking here roughly about 25 minutes after Special Counsel Jack Smith gave what were only his second ever remarks